Hello, my name is Abdulsamad, and in this lesson, we'll be animating a bouncing ball in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. We create a new Fusion composition and drag it to our timeline. We move to the Fusion page and I want us to organize our workspace before we start. First, I want us to make our nodes snap to the grid lines for easy arrangement. We do that by right-clicking on an empty space, we go to Arrange Tools, and click on To Grid. Now if we move the node, you can see that it snaps to the grid lines. Next I want Modify my keyframes window. In order to demonstrate the essence of what I'm going to do, I'll add two background nodes. We click here to shrink the inspector so we can have more space to work. We click on Keyframes to open the Keyframes window and we can drag it to increase its size. As you can see, we have our media out, background 1, and background 2 nodes visible on the window. This arrangement has nothing to do with which object is on top or below. The Keyframes window can get very bulky as we add more nodes. We click on the three dots at the top right corner of the window, and then click Show Only Selected Tools. And now you'll see that when we click any node, it'll appear on the Keyframes window. We're going to do the same to the spline editor by clicking on it, going to the three dots on its window, and then Show Only Selected Tools. We can close the spline editor, click on Keyframes, and position the window by the side so that it'll always be visible while we work on a project. We can click on the background 2 node and delete it. We can then connect our background node to the media out node so that we can see it in the viewer and change its color to white. Now I'll be going through some shortcuts we'll be using in this project and our future projects before we start working on the bouncing ball animation. We click on the viewer to notify DaVinci Resolve that the coming keyboard shortcuts are meant for the viewer. Hold Ctrl and scroll middle mouse button forward and backward to zoom in and zoom out. Use Ctrl F to fit the view to the windows or return it back to default. Click the middle mouse button to move the view around. Wheel Ctrl F to fit again. If your mouse doesn't have a middle button or the middle button doesn't work, you can use Ctrl Shift left click to move the view around. I'll Ctrl F again to fit. Now we can start working on our project. We move the media out node forward a little to have more space in between. We click the background and add a merge node by clicking on its icon. We can see it's connected to the media out. I'll delete it. I want to show you that we can also add it by holding Shift and dragging it on the arrow until it turns blue and then releasing it. We can see that it's connected to the media out by this method too. Next we add another merge node and connect it to the foreground input so that any node connected to it will be placed on top of the background. We drag a background node and connect it to the background input of the merge node. We click it and add a rectangular mask to it. We resize the x-axis by moving the sides. We resize the y-axis by moving the top or bottom, and then both simultaneously by moving the corners. We can move it along the y-axis by moving the arrow pointing up. We can move it along the x-axis by using the arrow pointing right. We can move it along both axes by using the square in the middle. We Ctrl Z to undo, then use the arrow to move it down along the y-axis. We add another background node and connect it to the green input, which is the foreground. We click on it and add an ellipse mask. Like with the rectangle, we move the sides to resize the x-axis, the top and bottom to resize the y-axis. We Ctrl-Z to undo that, and then the corners to resize on both axes. I'm okay with the size, but it seems that our rectangle is not aligned to the center. We click on it and go to the inspector. We double-click on Center to reset the values back to default, and now we can move it down along the y-axis. We click on our ellipse and we can move it using the arrow like we said, or using the center values in the inspector. We left-click on the Y values and move our mouse left or right to decrease or increase it. We can click on the X values to do the same. We undo that and move the ellipse to the top using the Y values. Now that we're about to start animating, we can expand our keyframes window. We click this icon to fit. We make sure our ellipse is selected, then we go to the inspector and click the diamond-shaped icon beside the center to add a keyframe. We click on the playhead on the keyframes window and use the right arrow key to move the playhead forward by 9 frames. We do that by pressing it 9 times. I'll drag it back to show you that we can do the same by using the controls in the viewer. We click the box, set the value to 9, and press Enter. Now we have our playhead on frame 9. We bring our ellipse down by clicking the Y center value and dragging our mouse to the left. A keyframe will automatically be created. We zoom it and make sure the ellipse overlaps the rectangle a little. You'll understand why eventually. We click on the box in the viewer and set the value to 18. Alternatively, we can press the right arrow on our keyboard 9 times to move the playhead to frame 18. We move our ellipse somewhere above the middle. We again use the right arrow on our keyboard to move our playhead 9 frames forward. We left-click and drag to highlight the middle keyframe, we Ctrl-C to copy, we click on an empty space on the center timeline, and Ctrl-V to paste the keyframe. Now we have our ellipse back on the rectangle. You have to be careful while doing this. Before you drag and highlight a keyframe, make sure its timeline is not selected. If I select its timeline and try to drag along it, it moves the whole keyframes instead. I'll undo that. So we click on an empty space, then we can drag and highlight. Click on an empty space, drag and highlight. We have animated our bounce, but we want the ball to bounce more than once. We highlight the last 2 keyframes. We Ctrl-C to copy, we move 9 frames forward. Click on our timeline, and Ctrl-V to paste. We repeat the same set of actions. Now we move our playhead along and we have the ball bouncing 3 times. Let's play this and see. The movement looks so rigid and unnatural, so we can adjust that using the spline editor. We click on it, click the displacement, and then the zoom to fit icon. We move our playhead along to identify those points where our ball is at its highest. We highlight them and press F on the keyboard to ease the keyframes. Let's play this again and see. It looks good, but we can make it better by making the ball spend a little more time at its highest points. We make sure our points are highlighted. We press T on the keyboard to see our easing values. We click on the padlock to lock the in and out values. We click on the box and drag our mouse towards the right to increase the value to about 58. We can play it again and see. Much better. We can close the spline editor. Now to make this look more realistic, we are going to add a squash and stretch to it. We move the playhead to the frame where the ellipse touches the rectangle and zoom in on it. What we want is for the ellipse to squash on the y-axis and stretch on the x-axis. To do that, we're going to use the width and the height values. So we make sure our playhead is on the frame where the ellipse touches the rectangle. We click on the playhead in the keyframes windows. We use the left arrow to move one frame backward. We click the diamonds to add a keyframe for the width and the height. We move one frame forward. We add keyframes for both again, then we move 3 frames forward, and add both keyframes again. We zoom in on this by holding Ctrl and scrolling middle mouse forward so we can clearly see our keyframes. We move the playhead to the middle keyframe and change the width value to stretch the ellipse. We then use the height value to squash it. This is why we made the ellipse overlap the rectangle initially. Now we can scrub through to see the movement. We zoom out a little bit and move our playhead to the next keyframe where the ellipse touches the rectangle. We click and drag to highlight the width keyframes. Ctrl-C to copy. Press the left arrow key to move one frame backward. Click on the width timeline and Ctrl-V to paste. We can see that the middle keyframe is aligned with the keyframe where the ellipse touches the rectangle. We move the playhead again to the next keyframe where the ellipse touches the rectangle. Press the left arrow key to move one frame backward. Click on the width timeline and paste. We click on the width timeline. Press the left arrow key to move one frame backward and paste. We do the same for the height. Click and drag to highlight the height keyframes, Ctrl-C to copy. We need to move our playhead to the position we intend to paste the keyframes. We can scroll through and drag it from here, or we can just do the same from the viewer. We move it to the next keyframe where the ellipse touches the rectangle, click on the height timeline, press the left arrow key to move one frame backward, Ctrl-V to paste. We can see that the middle keyframe is aligned with the keyframe where the ellipse touches the rectangle. We can repeat that for the rest of the keyframes. Now I click on the viewer and Ctrl-F to fit, move the playhead to the beginning and play our animation. We have successfully given our ball a more natural bounce. Let's see that again. We can leave this as it is. I'll Ctrl-S to save, or we can go ahead and add motion blur to give it a smoother look. Let's play this again and see how applying that would make a difference. To add motion blur, we click on the layer we animated, go to Settings, in the inspector, and tick Motion Blur. We can adjust the quality and the shutter angle. Let's play this and see how it looks. I think that's okay, so there's no need to adjust the settings. Let's play it again. Based. Again, we can leave this as it is. or we can go further and add a kind of color inversion every time the ball comes in contact with the rectangle to make it more interesting. We click on the Merge node, Shift spacebar, to open the Tools menu, search Invert. Click and Add. Now we have our colors inverted. To animate this, we move to the frame where the ball touches the rectangle. We press the left arrow key to move one frame backward. We click Settings from the inspector and then click the diamond beside the blend to add a keyframe. We press the right arrow key to move one frame forward and click the diamond again. We press the left arrow to go back and drag the blend slider down to 0.0. So we have this. We move to the next frame where the ball touches the rectangle. Add a keyframe. Press the left arrow key to move one frame backward and add another keyframe. We press the right arrow to go to the next keyframe and drag the blend slider down to 0.0. Again, we move to the next frame where the ball touches the rectangle. Add a keyframe. Press the left arrow key to move one frame backward and add another keyframe. We press the right arrow to go to the next keyframe and drag the blend slider up to 1.0. For the last time, we move to the next frame where the ball touches the rectangle, add a keyframe. Press the left arrow key and add another keyframe. We press the right arrow and drag the blend slider down to 0.0. Now we can play our animation and see how it looks. And we have that. That's all for this video. We'll talk more on the spline editor, some useful tools like the time stretcher, and some cool stuff we can achieve with them. Like this video if you find it helpful and subscribe to my channel for more DaVinci Resolve tutorials. Thank you for watching, and do have a great day.